Welcome, everybody. I'm Walter Isaacson, and I have the really great personal pleasure to be with two people I've admired for a long time. One I can call a friend for a long time, Brian Roberts. As I worked at Time Warner and watched it disintegrate, I watched Brian and his father do just the opposite and create the media company of the 21st century, but also be a good citizen of Philadelphia, somebody I care a lot about that. I love Philadelphia. I know you're building a new headquarters there, so thank you. Now that they finally have great restaurants in Philadelphia, it's one of the world's great cities. And of course, Bob Costas. Bob is probably the most famous person on campus, and I'll say that even to the Vice President of the United States.
This is nonsensical, Walter, even for a man of your distinction.
I try. He doesn't remember this. When I came to CNN, the only great idea I had was to hire Bob to replace Larry King. And I think the only great idea Bob had that year was, you got to be kidding. Why would I do that? So I don't think we even got to meet, but his agent just quit returning my phone calls, which is all right. Sometimes people describe somebody as an Emmy Award-winning broadcaster. And having been in the business, I say, well, you know, they're a dime a dozen. But Bob is a 26-time Emmy Award-winning broadcaster.
Here, here.
Let me start in a way we had... Well, and of course, August 9th, is it, that begins, or 8th?
5th.
5th.
Yeah.
The opening
We're going to miss 4 days.
4 days. The opening ceremony is August 5th, and it will be your 12th Olympics.
Yes.
So thanks. But let's start by you all winning the Olympics. Tell me that story, and then we'll tie it in with how Comcast works.
So we had the privilege to buy NBC Universal right at the 2009-2008 financial meltdown. And literally, I think 90 days into it, the wonderful, legendary Dick Ebersol departed the company, which was not part of the plan, and it just was what it was. So we were told that about 30 or 45 days later, the International Olympic Committee was re-auctioning off the rights to the next 4 or 8 years of Olympics. It was brand new to our watch, and we ended up gathering together the people who had worked on Olympics, and there are many, maybe one Bob Costas, but there are some incredibly talented people, one of whom's in the room, Jim Bell, who is going to produce what you're about to see in Rio, but had worked on the Olympics for many, many years, and won Emmys on their own. And we took that entire team to Lausanne for the bidding. And we didn't buy the company to be barbarians at the gate, but 90 days into it, we were faced with maybe the hardest decision I'd ever been part of, which we didn't want to lose money. Vancouver lost a couple $100 million to NBC. And Olympics, it was not clear whether we should put up or shut up. But we managed to prevail. Bob came over, and he can speak for himself, but it was one of the most emotional presentations we've ever given.
Well, Jacques Roger, who then was the IOC president, and many of his lieutenants were gathered around a table in this conference room, and each of the networks that were interested in the Olympics had made their presentations. But what we had was history. So we were able to show not just great performances, but how we had framed and presented those performances through the years. And I think that moved even some of the stoic IOC officials, and then they asked me to bat cleanup and kind of describe some of my own Olympic experiences and how there's a culture of presenting the Olympics at NBC, and no matter how talented and committed another network might have been, they would have had to have gotten up to speed on that culture, not just the facts of the history of it, but how is it presented and what are the relationships and how do you go about doing this peculiar bit of television, which is, yes, a sports event, but it's also a nearly 3-week-long television miniseries that still, in a niche world, aggregates an extremely large audience night after night. It's like 3 weeks of the Super Bowl or the Academy Awards that cuts through. And you have to present it in a way that, yes, satisfies somebody who's obsessed with the pole vault, but also largely engages people who would never watch the pole vault outside the context of the Olympics. The truth of the Olympics is that if you took the very same competitors, throw Michael Phelps in the pool, Gabby Douglas in gymnastics, doesn't make any difference, a week later, and stage it in Chicago or in Paris, exact same competition, it gets a fraction of the rating. So you have to understand that this is not presented primarily for the aficionado. It's presented for the person who every 4 years kind of taps into it. And that's what I was trying to get across. And apparently when it was over, people thought that since I had the longest tenure, now that Dick had left, the longest tenure of anyone in the room with NBC's Olympics, they're all patting me on the back saying, oh, that was great, and you just won the Olympics for us. And then they opened the bids. And our bid was so much better than any other network that
You won the Olympics.
I said to Brian afterwards, in truth, it wouldn't have mattered if I had gotten up there and drooled down my chin. It made no difference, but for about 15 minutes, I held a heroic position.
That's, okay, we'll leave it at, well, let me say this. Bob did an incredible job, and Jacques Rogue started to cry, and his team did, because they had maybe never seen NBC's coverage. Think about it. They go to the Olympics. They're working the entire time. They're not going to go home and literally watch the U.S. broadcast maybe a little bit, but we showed some incredibly emotional highlights of how the storytelling, what you just described. But we did, they had a very strange tradition. They have a glass bowl, crystal bowl. They have ESPN, Bob Iger and ABC. They had Fox and all of their talented people, and NBC. And after we all made our presentations, they have a cocktail party as if we're all getting along.
Right.
And then you submit your envelope into the bowl. And then you go back to your room and you wait. So while we were waiting, there's a gentleman named Gary Zankel, who's the president of the Olympics, does an amazing job. And his cell phone rang. Steve Burke and myself were sitting on pins and needles, and Gary went into the restroom of his hotel room where 20 of us were gathered to take the call in private. And I barged into the restroom and said, "You're not doing this alone. What are they saying?" And
Did you take the call, or what it was?
At the restroom.
And what's been great is once we got to know the new regime at the International Olympic Committee, they came back to us and said, would you extend for 12 more years? So NBC will have the Olympics through 2032. It's the longest rights deal in sports. They did not run an auction the second time, and I think Bob's presentation truly did carry the day.
We'll get to it's not just NBC, but how it ties together all of Comcast. But real quickly, if I may, Christine Lagarde was here yesterday, and she and Kitty Boone had this colloquy about would it make sense at some point just to move the Olympics back to Athens so that the messiness of this whole process could be solved?
Well, we're going to see how it plays out. We know that Brazil faces a list of crises or potential problems that's longer than any Olympics that I've been involved in. There are always concerns, there are always anxieties, and usually things come off without a hitch and then everybody breathes a sigh of relief. This time, not only have the world circumstances changed, but Brazil's circumstances are peculiarly problematic. Now, will that have a ripple effect? South Korea is already set for the next Winter Olympics, Tokyo for the next summer, and then Beijing for the winter in 2022. In 2024, Los Angeles is in the mix, which would be great for NBC and for Comcast. So too is Paris. The new mayor of Rome, who won't be the mayor in 2024, but she said recently that the Olympics would be wasteful for Rome.
Yeah, and even Boston kind of did.
Right, Boston was the designated U.S. city, and they dropped out because of concerns, not just about security. And remember, that was fairly close to the bombing that had happened there during the Boston Marathon, but also disruption of their daily lives and the traffic flow and everything else. As wonderful as the Olympics are, they do present challenges for host cities. So we'll see if the demand for the Olympics, which has been very, very strong for the last few decades, if that sustains, or if through no fault of their own, the Olympics find themselves back where they were in the late 70s, early 80s. You're coming off the Munich tragedy. Montreal just about goes bankrupt. The U.S. boycotts Moscow in 80. The Eastern Bloc retaliates by boycotting 84 in Los Angeles. And basically, they just handed it to Peter Uberoth and the LA Organizing Committee because he said, I can pull it off with volunteers and at a relatively low cost, and he did, and that kind of jump-started the Olympics in a positive way again. But these things are cyclical. So if it ever came to that, you could make an argument, which I'm sure would be refuted, but you could make an argument that you could put a summer and a winter location on each continent. For the sake of argument, there'd be a permanent summer location in the United States and probably a winter location in Canada. And there'd be a comparable situation in Europe, and the summer location would be Athens. There's undoubtedly a dozen or more reasons why that's not a good idea, but on the face of it, I can understand the argument.
Brian, you put in the biggest bid by far, and I assume part of it was because it would integrate all you're trying to do at Comcast in an era of live streaming and over the top and everything else. Explain how this how having the Olympics helps Comcast do what it's doing.
So let me first of all just give one opening, and then showing is sometimes better than talking. Can everybody hear me okay, by the way? Great. So the Olympics, to me, are a bit of a laboratory for where the future of television could very well be going. And you have so many different events. How do you keep track of it all? One generation, probably a lot of us in this room, will just want to listen to Bob Costas tell us those amazing stories and be there. But our kids and grandkids are used to 5 things at the same time and a different experience. The other thing I will add is we got very lucky. Live sports, it has, in a world with so many choices and on-demand being so prevalent in our life, whether that's called Netflix or streaming or other things, YouTube, mostly it's recorded and you watch it whenever you want to watch it. Big events have become the cornerstone of what NBC is trying to do, and the last 2 Olympics have been the largest events in television history. We fully expect Rio will be the largest event in television history. On top of that, we're in a world with social media. So what we're doing with this Olympics is we made a couple of leaps of faith. We're going to take every single event and put a live stream around it. And since this Olympics is in a East Coast-ish US time zone, 1 hour difference, it's really a live Olympics. So let me just show you.
Wait, so let me get that straight. In any given moment, any given hour, there'll be how many?
There'll be you'll see in 1 second, okay. 41 live streams up to, and 11 live channels. And so let me put it in context. The world comes together. In Atlanta is the last time we had a live Olympics. And that was 172 hours produced by NBC and on 1 channel. Now, let me just take a detour. We had, for me, what I would describe as an aha moment at Comcast about 6 or 7 years ago, and a couple of people are in the room today who helped invent this. And there's been a huge effort at Comcast to change from being a cable company to trying to be a technology company. And the aha was very simply that your cable box, which everybody hates, which I understand, the moment we put it in your house, it is obsolete. Because there's a better box somewhere else that just got invented, but there's no real reason to come back to your house and give you a new box for 5, 10 years, because it's not like a cell phone. It doesn't wear out, it doesn't fall, it doesn't break. And so we then want to give you a new feature. Do we do it to the old box or the new box or which box? And you know a lot of this. One day, our wonderful engineers said, check this out. Because of our internet business, we're able to put the brains of the box in the, quote, cloud. It's not the internet, but it's internet speed. So you click the remote, it talks to the cloud, it comes back to your house, and it does whatever you want. And we went out and we created what we called internally something called Project Infinity. And we said, what if we could give you infinite options as a technical matter, and then somehow figure out how to have you personalize it to what you want? And if we could do those 2 things, that would be better. And frankly, we changed our name to Xfinity for the very reason to head toward that vision. The Olympics coming up is a huge touch point in that journey. So here we are, Atlanta, 172 hours. Rio, we are going to broadcast 6,700 hours live.
Wow.
and it's on 11 networks, 40+ live streams.
Am I hosting all of it?
You are.
They're going to put you in the cloud,
Bob.
and it'll be 141 Bob Costas on demand.
And this is why we won the day. He's the best in the room. Okay, so what does that mean? So just for fun, that's over 6,000 hours. If you had 24 hours in a day, 250 days of nonstop television. It's absurd. Another way to look at it, it's every regular season NFL game since 2008. But that is what we're producing. We're taking 3,000 plus people, all working for that man right there, Jim, somehow coordinated in a ballet that is spectacular. But now we have this problem. What do we do? So here's what we're doing. Here I am watching television, and I pull up my Xfinity guide, my X1 guide. I just want to comment that we have now put out over 14, 15 million of these X1 guides. Close to 40 to 50% of our customers will have this. This isn't some laboratory experiment. This is real. We're putting out 40,000 a day. And we have 85,000 movies and TV shows on demand. So normally you just go to on demand. You're used to doing that. So we've created at the bottom a new thing here for Rio. And if I click into Rio, I'm now going to go into a totally Olympics guide. So here we go, and we say, okay, what's on now? So how do I find this out? Well, here's tennis. Here's men's golf. Here's men's soccer. Another way to search is by sport. I can just say, I want to search by athlete. If I'm with such a diverse, multicultural country, I want to find, France, archery, and I can go right to that. And so it can go by nation. Or I can go, first time we've ever done this, we're taking what's on the internet, the live streams, which is on an NBC Sports app, and we're integrating that right into your guide on your television. So here, I'm going to be able to say there's a men's basketball stream, there's track and field. So let's go watch something. We're going to go into USA, which is having swimming, and what will pop up is our Xfinity Sports app. Now here you'll see, okay, I'll click it. While I still can watch the event, it's going to give me real-time companion activity toward that event. So in this case, I see that Michael Phelps is in lane 3. I click on him, and I now pull up a Michael Phelps page, giving me lots of options. So first thing I do is I want to favorite Michael Phelps for later viewing, so I always know what he's up to. Then I say, let's look at little videos that I can watch after this race, and I'll see there's the 200, here's an interview he did, here's something maybe from YouTube or from the internet with his family. I have lots of Michael Phelps choices for if I'm interested in doing that. Over here, we have a mini guide of Rio that while I'm watching here, I say, well, let's find another sport. So we go to gymnastics. Now here we see it's got real-time data incorporated into the guide for the first time. So we see that we're in the women's team rotation, team event. We're on rotation 2, and the USA is currently in first. Well, that sounds interesting. Let's go watch that. So I click watch. Now, in the old days, we would have gone right to the team finals on NBC. Since we're live streaming, we want to give you all those options as well. So you say, well, here's every apparatus has its own feed, not just women's gymnastics. So we say, well, I'm really into floor routine, so let's go. So I'm out on the internet that quickly. Now, I mentioned that we have really tried to make the search interesting and personalized. The big second breakthrough was voice. So we have put out 7 million remote controls that allow you to do this. I say, how old is Gabby Douglas? And we're going to have all the content synced to the remote control. We have done 1 billion voice commands since launching this less than a year ago.
This was Steve Jobs' idea of how you would navigate in a 150-channel universe.
You have unique insight to that. For intellectual property purposes, I don't know what you're talking about. But so I get into Gabby Douglas, I click on info, and I say, but I think for 10 years plus, a lot of us have been chasing voice as the way to do it. It's so intuitive. So I say, okay, I want to favorite Gabby Douglas. This is another way to do that. But now I, show my Olympics favorites. So here we will see that we have Gabby Douglas. We had Michael Phelps from a moment ago. You can favorite a sport, favorite a country. It's fantastic. Now let's go back to the Rio guide. A second thing we're putting is Gold Zone, which is an NBC product. Every great event, you just want to watch one channel, it's just going to show you finals of races. So here we are. We click again, it's another stream. We're in a relay race. America happens to win. So we go, how is the USA doing? And just like the sports app companion, it'll take you right to the medal count.
Wow.
So it's 8 o'clock at night or a few minutes after. I know that Bob is coming on. It's primetime show. Watch NBC. Don't have to know the channel number. It automatically goes to high def. And here we are on the NBC feed. But I'm a few minutes late, so I just click the restart button, and we'll go right to the top of the hour, and now we'll see the primetime show. That's our demo.
Amazing. If you all think this was just, a prepackaged demo, the Comcast tent is right there as you walk out the front door. It's where you registered. Go to the corner, and you can pick up a remote, and there's somebody there to demonstrate it to you. And you can even do it on non-Olympic things. Like you could say to the remote, I want to watch Goldie Hawn movies.
We were just playing with it. All the content, any actor, any actress, any movie, watch, go find kids' movies. What should I watch? It learns. So we've taken sort of personalization, Amazon, if you will. We give you streams of content that's not just available on your cable. Obviously, in this new world, and all of this will work on your cell phone and your tablet, so you can, we're playing.
So I can say to my remote, I'd like a Goldie Hawn movie. It would offer me some, it would pop up, and then as I'm riding somewhere, I could watch it on my cell phone.
Correct.
Correct.
And all the sports and all the Olympics, which will be on mobile, and all of our social, everything has to be on every platform. So part of that, the X for Xfinity, was cross-platform. It's just more of a geeky thing we were doing. One day said, we really have to convey that the company's changed. It's changing. And when we bought NBC Universal, we saw all of this trove of content, storytelling, incredible passion, and how could we bring it all together? There's nothing quite like the Olympics.
I do urge everybody, go out sometime this week and go to the corner of the Comcast tent and actually try it out for yourself. Also, Jim Bell, where are you? There. Stand up, Jim. Jim is a hero in the profession. Executive producer, is it? The EP of the Summer Games. And how many times have you done this?
This will be my 11th.
All right, Jim. Thank you. And thank you for being here, Jim. Could any other company have pulled this off? I mean, you have cable, you have Wi-Fi, you have internet service, you have content with NBC, and you have golf channels. Having, as I said, worked at Time Warner and watched all that be spun off, was it better to keep it all together and gives you an advantage?
I think so, and I think our employees think so. I think it comes from I think had Steve Ross, who had a lot of this vision when he put Time Warner together, but passed away shortly thereafter, unfortunately. He had a very similar vision of coming from content, heading into technology. In a world that's changing as fast and dynamic as it is, you could argue be really small, but that's the way to win. And the other side is get bigger, have scale, and try to work as one company. So when we go to promote a movie next weekend called Secret Life of Pets, you will see, and probably have seen, every one of our networks. On the Golf Channel, little animals pop up that are the pets. There's all the various stars of other shows talking about, their favorite animals. It'll be all over the Olympics, previews during the movies. We have a program, one person whose job, and she happens to be here as well, Steve titled it Symphony. And I don't think there's any company who's trying to draw together these parts. So what you give up by being bigger is definitely something, but what you hope to gain is scale. Well, you better use it. Take some risks, make some mistakes, have everybody work on one team, and we're fortunate that we've had a consistent team together for a long time, and the person running NBC Universal used to run Comcast Cable, so he was very sympathetic to the needs of both parts of the organization, and so far we're off to a great start.
Bob? Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, you got it.
I wanted to ask you a more philosophical question. You and I have talked about this in the past, which is, in a world, it used to be that we'd all watch the evening news and sort of know that's the way it is. We'd all watch Bob Costas and say that's the moment we're all going to share at the water cooler, so to speak, or the figurative water cooler. How do we keep that notion of a common ground when people are going to 180 live streams differently?
Well, I think part of NBC Sports Philosophy taps into that very question. We have the NBC Sports Network, and so you might see a given NASCAR race, or you might see a regular season hockey game there, or on a Saturday or Sunday afternoon, which has a different ratings imperative than primetime, you might see those events. But by and large, what we've pegged ourselves to sports-wise is big events in prime time or late afternoon that spills over into prime time. We take the Kentucky Derby, a 2-minute race, and we make it into a 3-hour storytelling show. And
6 hours.
Well, 6 hours if you count NBCSN, and 3 hours on the network. And
You take over Meet the Press, too, and they have to interview the horse. But
right. And people who don't know how to read a racing form flock to it. It feels like an event. We have Sunday Night Football. We do not have an array of regional football games. We have Sunday Night Football and now a handful of Thursday Night Football games.
So are you hoping that people at certain points in the Olympics will just all come together?
Yes, and they will. And none of this, as astonishing and as wonderful as it is, I mean, I'm looking forward to it. It's great. None of this, we believe, our research indicates, will diminish our primetime rating. In fact, it will enhance it, because the research shows, unless there's some sort of pivot in Rio and beyond, the research shows that people who seek this individualized sort of thing out are actually more likely to watch the expanded coverage in primetime. They're so into the Olympics that, okay, yeah, now I can see, in effect, the raw feed, yes, with commentary, but without some of the framing, the storytelling, the backstories and all that stuff. I can see that at 2 o'clock in the afternoon at my desk or whatever. But now I'm home after dinner. It's the same event, but I'm going to see how NBC presents it that way.
So
it actually drives audience to the mothership.
Yeah.
And I totally endorse what he said, and we told the International Olympic Committee, we were going to lean in technologically and go where nobody's tried. So it's never been tried before. No one has ever taken a live event like an Olympic scale. They've done the Super Bowl, but there's not a lot of other choice. So you're not really going to choose to watch it on your phone if you can watch it on TV. Here you've got 6,000 other choices, literally. But we are telling the advertisers, we believe this is going to widen the funnel at the top. We're working with BuzzFeed and Snapchat and Facebook and Twitter. And in a world that is so cluttered, what can we do for the Olympics? And we didn't talk about it, but in the world of Brexit and everything else, the Olympic Charter is the world will stop any war, everybody who's a participant. It is a amazing, once you spend time with the Olympic movement, you really can't help but getting caught up in it and proud of it and want to celebrate it. So we're taking every resource we have and those that we partner with and saying, let's have the conversation be about these amazing athletes, the countries coming together, the individual stories. And I think BuzzFeed says, well, we're not going to show an event. We're going to talk about what Michael Phelps eats after he's done a race. Mm-hmm. And that, to another generation, is more interesting in some kids. Well, they will then come and sit with mom and watch the race at 10 o'clock at night. That may very well be exactly what the Olympics needs in the modern world.
As an aside, it'll be interesting to see whether the mainstream press and the Twitterverse picks up on the fact that their complaints have not only been addressed, they've been addressed over and over again. The complaint has always been, why don't you show it live? Well, those complaints come from people who don't have $1 billion invested in each Olympics, in rights fees, production costs, and everything else. If they were in Dick Ebersol's position, Bob Wright's position, now Brian Roberts, or Steve Burke or Mark Lazarus's position, they would either do the same thing or they'd be fired or placed in an insane asylum. Because That's the only way to aggregate an audience. But I understand the desire on the part of some sports fans to see it as it happens, because that's the general nature of sports, as it happens. So that has been an ongoing complaint, even though from a business standpoint, any reasonable person would have taken the same course. But now that complaint has been addressed, all right? You have no complaint. You don't want to watch the prime time? Don't watch it. Watch it this way. But our bet is that people are going to watch both, at least in part.
So they watched it live stream at 2 or 3 or 4, and they've watched on Periscope and Snapchat and everything else. How does that change your primetime broadcast?
I think the essence of storytelling is still the same. But I think we need to be mindful of what used to be a nugget of interesting information, and I've got to keep it in my head, and I've got to confer with the researchers. What do people already know about Michael Phelps that I might have thought 2 Olympics ago was a fresh nugget of information that will inform them and amuse them? But it's already out there. It's already out there. So that makes our job a little bit more challenging to dig for new stuff. But there will be stuff, there'll always be stuff that we'll have that no one else has, because Michael Phelps is going to come to us. Gabby Douglas is going to come to us, and she's going to speak with us. And we're going to get that in a way that no click is going to provide you until we've done it and presented it.
That's an interesting concept, which is that digital media is good at giving you information. It's not great at storytelling. You actually need the storyteller to do that, and that's your role?
Yeah, and I think that until further notice, that world, at least for big events, remains unchallenged.
I'll give you an economic reality check on that. We've sold more ads, and we've sold close to 50% more ads. I think it's maybe a little high in that number, but not much, directionally, than we did in London. So
And
4
what
years
percentage
later,
is on your broadcast NBC
100%.
network? Okay.
Not 100%, but we're going to put on digital, but the majority is for NBC primetime. We are steering people to Bob and to that, and advertisers, but they're now able to be on all those digital platforms, and they're reaching this, rather than just complaining about technological change, we're trying to embrace it. Some of it's good, some of it's bad, but if you add it all up, in the last 4 years, any individual channel, including NBC, ratings have gone one direction. Because there's more choices. People are on Facebook, they're on Twitter, there are more channels. There's now Netflix, there's Hulu, Amazon. It goes on, and it's never going to stop. So what do you do in that environment? Well, try to be a company that can embrace a big event, try to get us all back to that water cooler. That's what we saw in the Olympics that day. The first time we did it, we went, phew, the advertisers came. There is something magical. It's why like you said, if you show the same race 3 weeks later, it's not the same. And that's the culture that we were so lucky to inherit. Kentucky Derby, he mentioned. Kentucky Derby used to be on another network, a full-time sports channel I won't mention. The ratings are something like 50% higher, 100% since NBC took over, because they are story. We can't do it a lot, but when we do it, they do it. And so we thought Olympics is the place.
We actually take some of the producers who work on the Olympics, work on the Kentucky Derby, because they understand that storytelling aspect, that you need a backstory. When you get to the Super Bowl, people are interested in Peyton Manning, but you don't have to tell them who Peyton Manning is. The interest only increases by degree. Baseball fans watch the World Series in greater numbers. You don't have to explain the difference between a sacrifice punt and a hit and run, and you don't have to tell them who Clayton Kershaw is, except here's his record and here's his ERA. Whereas at the Olympics, people step out of the shadows for 4 years and into the spotlight. Simone Biles may be the best female gymnast in history. Not just the best this year, the best in history. Until this week, maybe when people started watching the trials, they didn't know who this 19-year-old girl from Houston, Texas was. You have to introduce her to the audience. And the same thing is largely true at something like the Kentucky Derby. The horse cannot talk. Okay, so what So what's the story of the jockey? What's the story of the owner? What's the story of the trainer? What's the backstory of Churchill Downs? Why do people dress up and think it's a big deal to wear these dresses and hats? You know, all that sort of thing is part of what fills it out. And there are some people who are hardcore racing fans or hardcore, swimming fans who think it's all superfluous. But you know what? They're going to watch anyway.
Watch it. Yep, we all do. Speaking of which, you named a couple. Who should we be looking out for in this Olympics that I don't know of yet?
Well, I think that the primary American name is Simone Biles. And then you have a few encore performances that I think are going to capture people's attention. Last go-round, we assume, for Michael Phelps. Last go-round, we assume, for Usain Bolt of Jamaica. If there's an Olympic Mount Rushmore, and we won't confine it to 4, but if there's a larger Mount Rushmore, those two are already up there with Jesse Owens and with Carl Lewis and Jim Thorpe and Wilma Rudolph and people like that. So seeing how they close out their careers. And then I think part of the story is, can Rio pull it off? Mm-hmm. What will the atmosphere be? Assuming they encounter no problems, you're going to have a location where everywhere you look, it's a picture postcard. There's a high-spirited party atmosphere. Mm-hmm. The soccer competition ought to be passionate.
Right.
When Brazil takes on their regional rival Argentina, two soccer-mad countries, the chances are that Pele is the last torchbearer. He's probably, especially in a country torn by political strife, he's probably the only universally popular Brazilian left.
So he's sort of the Muhammad Ali who's going to be this time lighting the...
Right, maybe not quite as moving and iconic, but to Brazilians, deeply significant. So all the soccer competition is going to be beyond wonderful. Katie Ledecky, who was already known from the last Olympics, but Katie Ledecky could very well be America's star swimmer this time around.
And tell me about the doping problem and how that's going to be resolved.
I don't think they can resolve it by August 5th. It's an ongoing thing, but I think it's a step in the right direction that the IAAF and the IOC in concurrence has said, at least to the Russian track and field competitors, no.
Are the Russian track and field competitors actually not going to compete?
Well, this hasn't been resolved yet, but there is some
Brexit,
talk. Some talk that if you're an individual competitor and if you can prove your innocence, that you can compete under an Olympic flag, but not under the Russian flag, as I understand it now. But other portions of the Russian delegation not implicated will be allowed to compete. The difference here is nobody's being naive. Many athletes, including American athletes, Marion Jones, Lance Armstrong, the list goes on, have been guilty of PED use. But so far as we know, they all did it on their own with rogue chemists. There's never been a systemic, ongoing, government-sponsored and administered program like what Russia has since the days of the old Eastern Bloc and the East Germans and the Soviet Union, and that's what they've been sanctioned for.
And they've been handling it right, in your opinion?
They could possibly go further, but they've gone further than they've ever gone to date. And by the way, there's politics involved in this. They've delivered a slap in the face to Vladimir Putin, who put on a $51 billion Olympics for them in Sochi only 2 years ago.
Right.
And even though it's not under the IOC, there's a World Cup coming to Russia the next time around. So Russia's deeply involved in world sport, and so it takes some gumption. This isn't like sanctioning Bolivia. It takes some gumption to do it.
Mm-hmm. Brian, back to technology for a second. In an era of cord cutting and over the top and all, is Google, if it does fiber to the curb and other things, is that going to end up being your biggest competitor as opposed to ABC, Disney? And how do things like the Olympics serve as a bulwark against the technological changes coming from different directions?
It's a lot more fun talking about athletes.
All right, how's the doping scandal?
Yeah, exactly. I'm much more of an expert on that. But just listening to Bob, I'm sitting here getting excited for August 5th, and I think that that's what you do so well, and it's amazing. Google Fiber, if I said raise your hand if you've heard of Google Fiber, probably 100% of the hands might go up. And if I said who has Google Fiber, there might be 5 hands that go up. I think they have less than certainly less than 1 million customers, maybe less than 100,000. So it's a very creative kick by a wonderfully creative company to say people want more, faster, 1 billion bits a second. And so I take it as good old healthy competition. The phrase frenemy is used in this world. We do a lot of work with Google. They do things that may be very competitive, and they probably look at us and do the same, what you said about Apple. We look at the tech companies as absolutely very relevant to all of our futures. But as we try to think about what our company's about, if Google is, searches the world, I think is their motto, and Facebook connects you to your friends. And we connect you, or we bring you the moments that matter most in your life. And Olympics would be right up there, and the content that Bob's been talking about, and the movies we make, and the television programs, and the news, and Meet the Press. We have a very special company. And so parts of it will be challenged, but what we're doing in response is the kind of thing I demoed. We're launching something this year called DOCSIS 3.1. DOCSIS, very exciting name. The engineers have said that you can have 1 billion bits a second without having to rewire the streets and putting out fiber. And so we're going to launch that to a big portion of our base.
Is that still fiber and coax cable? Or?
Yes. And so what's happened is, if you think about your desk, you don't typically connect to a fiber optic. You connect to some sort of company LAN or some sort of coaxial wire. And then it's same for wireless. Your phone is only as good as the wired network around it. So Wi-Fi is great, but the closer that Wi-Fi, all Wi-Fi are not equal. What is the difference? The difference is, how fast does it get on fiber? So it goes from the last foot being wireless to how quickly can I get onto a wire. So it's a hybrid world, and we think we're going to have a very important position in that world, but not unique to ourselves, and we can learn from others.
One of the almost technological imperatives of the digital age is that you should be able to get whatever you want, whenever you want it, and just what you want. Do you see eventually an unbundling of the cable model? And does Comcast better position to let that happen?
It's happening. It's happening naturally and unnaturally. So some providers are dropping channels. If you turn on Dish Network right now, you don't get certain broadcast signals. We've had those kind of interruptions. But none of the big media companies are walking in the door and saying, hey, just take CNN, but you don't have to take True TV. And we're the same. You can't just buy NBC Sports Network and not take USA Network. And that's how this business grew up. You can't buy the sports section of the newspaper and say,
But nowadays you can, because the newspaper became disaggregated. Will that happen to your industry?
It's, if at some level you'll have more options. Will it ever actually be better off for the consumer to buy every channel individually? It might be possible, but I don't think it will actually yield the benefit people would like to wish. Because unfortunately or fortunately, the Olympics cost more money. The Oprah Winfrey Network costs money. ESPN goes up. Costs have gone up, and as we have more people distributing, an unnatural thing happened. The power shifted a little bit to the programmer. So the prices are actually going...
content became king, yeah.
Well, it became something. It became more expensive.
Yeah, more expensive.
And so...
But do you worry that having the pipeline, meaning, the broadband into the home, that will at some point be made a common utility?
Well, they passed a law that could give that more possibility. I think that's a disaster. I'll tell you why. We're at an ideas festival. It sounds appealing to have net neutrality. And we're for that because we've never wanted to think that that's not a product somebody wants, is to be able to do whatever you want, whenever you want. It's very personalized. And the faster, the better. But we have a $10 billion capital budget this year. So to think that more regulation is going to encourage more investment in any industry, one has to be pretty thoughtful about that regulation. I'll tell you about your wonderful book on Steve Jobs. We had a great session with him one time and said, he showed us the iPhone, and I was trying to see if he would build a cable box for us, what later is Apple TV. And he said to me, you ought to just put Wi-Fi in all your boxes. And I literally went home and said, and tell me again, what is Wi-Fi? Bill Gates once said to us 20 years ago, when he put $1 billion into Comcast, and said, someday you'll have more data customers than you have TV customers. And there was no internet. I didn't know how he could know that. 1997, it just had started. He had bought something called Web TV. Last year, 2015, we crisscrossed.
Wow.
We have more data customers than we have video.
And what about revenue?
Revenue, if you net out the programming fees, then it's about half and half.
Okay.
So long answer to say that my view is rather than make one big bet for your company, maybe be right, maybe be wrong, we've taken a diversified approach. So if they all cord cut to your a la carte world, they're going to want our broadband to do it. And our broadband, we ought to invest as much as we can and make it as great and make it the best in the world. And despite a lot of rhetoric and politics around it, it's a competitive business. We take on AT&T, Google Fiber, wireless, new kids in the garage. Competition is the answer that drives you to want to innovate, not the government giving you a standard and saying, here's the answer. So within that world, I don't think that we're too worried, but we're worried enough that we constantly look out for it.
My last question for you, and get prepared, because I'm going to go to the audience, and I figure everybody will be asking Bob questions. So, because...
Note to audience.
Yeah. Well, I figure as much as I'm interested...
Don't get pink eye on the first day of the Olympics.
Yeah.
Answer that question.
That was heroic.
It was heroic and horrific is what it was.
Comcast has been, with David Cohen, with yourself, with your father, so many others, a deeply committed corporation to real values, including the value of diversity, helping bring people together. As I said, Philadelphia, you work with us at the Institute, for which thank you, on a State of Race in America program. What are you doing, like I'd call it, you call it essentials, to make sure that all of this wonderful technology is helping bring us together across economic lines rather than exacerbating a digital divide in which people get left behind?
Well, it's obviously super critical opportunity or nightmare, which is here you've got this anything you want world when you want it, but you got to have access. Mm-hmm. And so either it excels. So I remember the chairman of the FCC giving a dinner we had in Washington and he said, I was just in Mississippi, and the school teacher said, what do I do for homework? I tell them all to go home and get on the internet, or do I tell them that's completely unfair because half the kids don't have it in that particular time in that classroom? So that was part of inspiring us, and David really jumped on it, and you know David pretty well.
David Cohen, who will be here later in this week.
And he started a program we call Internet Essentials, and basically if you're on government assistance for any reason, and now if you're a senior at a certain income level and pretty easy qualifications for a community that is underprivileged, however you want to phrase it. It's not free, but it's $10 a month for our internet product. We'll give you all sorts of digital literacy training, and we get access to a computer for $100. So we've had a couple million folks take advantage of that.
I didn't know that.
We've gone to every city and worked with the public schools and with the infrastructure and the mayors and community organizations. It's kind of shocking. At $10 a month, it should be 100% adopted. It's not adopted at all.
Is that a cost issue or
no? I think it's a language issue. It's a knowledge issue. We've now put all of our, a lot of our guides in multilingual, but it's the single, probably, we have two programs that, if you said, tell me what you do that you're so proud of, away from things. One, my father started, which is called Comcast Cares Day. We had 100,000 plus employees in 700 locations in 20 countries volunteering on the same day in 700 local organizations that they pick. And then Internet Essentials, which, you know, we've got an opportunity through broadband to help narrow that divide, and we can play a small role in that.
right here. And then, yeah.
I'd like to.
Just shout it out, I'll repeat, stand up, and then the microphone will hit you halfway through.
There it is, right behind you.
Thank you. My name is Bob Potter from Dallas, Texas, and I'd like to ask Brian about the cash flow. Of course, underlying all of this is the question, how does Comcast make money? And you showed us a very sophisticated, complex demonstration. Is the cash flow as complex as that demonstration?
Great. Would you hand the microphone to the gentleman here in the white t-shirt?
We have about $75 billion in revenues, $25 billion in cash flow, $10 billion in capital spending, taxes. You end up with about $8 billion of free cash flow before dividends. So it's a very large set of numbers. We owe $55 billion. All of this has been done first generation. My father started the company in 1963. He was 42 years old, passed away last year at 95. So if you're in your 40s and you haven't found your thing, it's not too late. He was a serial entrepreneur, and he heard about a community antenna television system in Tupelo, Mississippi, and he had sold his men's belt and men's cologne. I always joke when I'm at a prestigious event such as this to say, if we were still selling men's belts, I would have worked for my dad. So I wouldn't be here because it is not the most glamorous business, but community antenna was to bring CBS from Memphis to Tupelo, and they put up a community antenna. And in one lifetime, you could have a company of those kind of numbers. The number one he liked to borrow money and then go, oh my God, how are we going to pay it back? And never saw a deal he didn't like. And therefore I followed suit. And today, the number one criticism I get from investors is, why don't you have more debt?
So you can get DreamWorks Animation and solve that.
You know, it's kind of, so we think we're conservative in a crazy world.
If I'm not mistaken, part of the question, though, is, all right, you've got all this content streaming. Where's the ad revenue from it, right?
Oh.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Thank you, Bob. The ad revenue from streaming, there will be commercials in it. We reduce the load. We sell it to, so if you're Pepsi or Coke, you're buying across all of our platforms. And we're constantly readjusting that advertising to create some cash flow, but you need to buy our broadband. One thing we never get criticized of is charging too little. So we will find a way to get monetized if we can, and we've got to be very mindful not to charge too much.
Do you think in the end it'll be a 50-50 advertising consumer revenue splits? Is that what you're aiming for in 5-10 years?
You know, I'm an old dog. I think the subscription model has proved to be great. Netflix has shown it's even greater without ads. So if anything, there's pressure to get rid of ads. So what we're working on is how to make those ads more relevant. Google has shown that people don't mind giving up all their personal data. If you actually stopped and talked about what you give Facebook, you would be horrified. And we don't do any of that with us. But people love them and don't like the ads. So we have to adjust to that model more than they have to adjust our model. And so we're doing things like, for instance, if you go back to watch that relay race that I showed, you can watch it on demand. The ad will change potentially every day. And we are working on a technology that within 18 months, I hope, you will get a different ad in your house, my house, and Bob's house. That's where we got to get to. That's what Google's all about.
Gary?
Thank you. Other than the fact that the number one symptom of Zika is
Gary,
pink eye.
Stand up. Yeah.
Other than the fact that the number one symptom of Zika is pink eye.
Pink eye's way down the list. It's on the constellation, but it's down the list.
Are you concerned about Zika, and what do you think the effect of the Zika virus will have on the Olympics, on the games?
It's not my primary concern. August is winter near the equator. The mosquito population is greatly diminished. It's not going to be winter chilly, but it'll be less warm, it'll be less humid. People will be advised to take precautions. Where it affects younger people, both male and female, because we now know it can be transmitted through male to female contact, and if that female becomes pregnant, there's potentially catastrophic consequences, but people need to be advised of that. Can we eliminate it as a concern? That would be nonsensical. It is a concern. Is it my primary concern? Not just individually, but looking at Rio and its overall issues, I wouldn't put it at the top of the list any longer.
I'll just tell you, we've had the Health and Human Services Secretary last night. 3 FDA directors say, don't make, unless you're a pregnant marathoner, don't make this your primary concern when it comes out.
Or a young man who wants to get his wife pregnant.
The far back there, and then the near back, and then I'm going to go up here so our mic runners can figure it out. Yes. Go up, I'll get you. Yeah, shout it. Our mic runners are not, yeah.
Great story, Joe. Can you make a comment about Ali's passing?
Muhammad Ali's passing.
Well, there was a confluence of events and personal traits with Ali that we will never see again.
Absolutely.
For example, Arthur Ashe was in many ways the most impressive athlete I've ever met. And intellectually, he had a greater grasp of the issues of his time than Ali did. But Ashe, as engaging and impressive as he was if he was sitting here, Ashe was not the dynamo, the extraordinary, like, human ball of magnetism that Ali was. And while Ashe was a champion tennis player, he had no claim to being the greatest tennis player in the world. Take Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, who to this day is truly a public intellectual. Many people have probably read his essays that he writes for Time magazine. They're extraordinarily insightful. And they come not from any one, category of ideas. He is, as HBO termed him in a recent documentary, a minority of one. And Kareem, you could say, was, as a basketball player, 6-time champion, 6-time MVP. People are surprised that he scored more points than Michael Jordan. He's still the all-time NBA scoring leader. He's as accomplished as an athlete, but again, a soft-spoken and shy man in a team sport. And unless you count the Dream Team, which postdates Kareem's career, basketball was not global in the sense that Ali's boxing career was global. It became global partly because of what the U.S. government forced upon him. He had to go global to fight at first while his case was being adjudicated, and so he went to London, he went to Europe, he went to Canada, and then, finding that appealed to him, he went to the Philippines, he went to Zaire. There was a period of time before the communications explosion that we're now living in where there was no question that he was the most famous person on the planet. So his reach was global. Okay, but let's say that his every victory was the same, and his every audacious utterance and principled stand was exactly the same, but he looked and fought like Sonny Liston. It's a different story. You have to concede to the obvious. The man was beautiful. He was a beautiful figure in a brutal sport, and the way he fought drew in even people who otherwise didn't care about it or might even be repelled by it. He was a wonder to behold even when he was Cassius Clay. And then he took the 2 primary objections to him. Right? Obviously, he became this figure when he lit the torch at the Olympic Games. By that time, in the throes of Parkinson's, and let's not be euphemistic, Parkinson's really was a result of the punishment that he took in the ring. At that moment, he's a less threatening figure to America. But to much of America in the 60s and 70s, he's not just polarizing, he scared the crap out of them, okay? Scared the crap out of them. And they were anxious to discredit him. How can we discredit him? Well, it was easy to discredit him when he was part of the Nation of Islam, Elijah Muhammad, white man is Satan, the white race was created by a mad scientist 6,000 years ago. It's easy to discredit that nonsense. But then when he went to mainstream Islam, and even towards his death, disavowed the perversions of Islam that lead to violence. So when he went there, and then, as a matter of principle, said, all right, I'm not going to step forward for the draft, then everyone said, oh, draft dodger, coward. But everyone knew he could have gone in and fought USO exhibitions like Joe Louis had done before him and never seen combat. Instead, he could have seen the inside of a prison cell. And so even if you were the most conservative right-wing person and wanted to condemn him, you had to say, wait a second, on his own terms, this guy has complete integrity and a different kind of courage. He'd give the whole thing up. He didn't know if he'd ever step through the ropes again, if he'd give up all the purses, give up the platform. He was obviously a vain and egotistical man. That was among his qualities in an appealing way. And by the way, he is not responsible for every trash-talking dope that blights the landscape now. I mean, he's no more responsible, you know, for Warren Sapp or some guy grabbing his crotch doing a touchdown dance than Alexander Graham Bell is responsible for, like, telemarketing. You know, just he invented a thing by the magnetism of his own sui generis personality and circumstances, and it was charming. While he was simultaneously challenging America, he's sitting down with Johnny Carson and beguiling and charming America. So now comes the second challenge to him from the old line boxing guys. Oh, he's all flash and dash and blah, blah, blah. But when he came back after 3.5 years, his skills had been diminished. He was no longer able to truly float like a butterfly and sting like a bee. And then he had to go through this crucible that Joe Frazier and George Foreman put him through. And he had to prove his guts and fortitude in the ring to people who had doubted him. And he trumped their argument too. And then the third thing is where we saw him with Parkinson's. Here's a guy who floated like a butterfly, stung like a bee. He's too pretty to be a fighter. He's the most voluble athlete we've ever seen, and all that is taken away from him. It's poignant. It's like some sort of Greek tragedy. And what does he do? Does he go and hide? Or does he figure out a way to reinvent himself and come back on the world stage and be consequential again? So you can go back and say, well, he had this misstep, that misstep. I disagree with him with this or that. But in the big picture, his abundant humanity and decency and his impact, no American athlete other than Jackie Robinson had anything like the social impact, and Jackie's impact was not global. Ali stands alone. You can make an argument. Was he a greater boxer than Ruth or Willie Mays was a baseball player, or Jim Brown a football player, or Michael Jordan a basketball player, or Wayne Gretzky a hockey player? That's just a sports argument. But if you're talking about impact, he's the undisputed champ.
Beautiful.
Let me say, I know there are other people with questions, and I'll invite you on stage to do it privately, that ender not only reminded us how great Muhammad Ali is, but also how great you are and the role of storytelling is, and why we need storytellers to bring us together. Brian, Bob, thank you very much.